So a bunch of you guys submitted another video for me to check out from another channel we've looked at before. It makes really good videos called AVV Gaming. Really great channel. You should absolutely follow and sub. But what made me want to do this was seeing one of the top comments. So I pulled up the video and I was like, oh, I wonder what this is like. AVV Gaming again, subscribe. I'm already subscribed. Recommend you do too. But the comment said before Starfield came out, everyone was hoping to get Skyrim in space, which is true. That was one of the common statements at the time, was that we're going to get Starfield, but in space, or Fallout in space. People got really excited by that. And in some ways we got it, but it's a different thing. But the comment goes on. Now my fear is that Elder Scrolls 6 will be Starfield in Tamriel, which is actually, I think, exactly what it's going to be. It's exactly what I think it's going to be. Because how does Bethesda work? How does Bethesda work? Well, they tend to be very iterative. They take what they did before and then they build on it. And so they have, you know, their game offering is basically like a Lego set. And every time that they put out a new game, they've added 20 pieces to it. And then the next game is that, just kind of rearranged, but put 20 more pieces on top. And so each game is bigger and more expansive and all of that, but they specifically are trying to build on the systems they put in the last one. So Fallout 4, for example, built upon some of the DLC that they put for Skyrim. And so they had this like base building system. It was quite rudimentary, but they built on it in Fallout 76 and they expanded it even more into the camp system. And then when they made Starfield, they expanded that even more into the settlement system where you could assign people you recruit to work on certain machines and all this, and they expanded it out further. And one of the other things they did with, of course, Starfield was they took the same base building mechanics and built it into a ship customization system. And they also developed a bunch of procedural tech. So what I think Elder Scrolls 6 is basically going to be is it's going to be a game that has a very large map that utilizes procedural generation to achieve like endless dungeons and dungeon crawling and stuff. That's probably going to be super, super repetitive. And then also, I think there's going to be tons of the settlement systems and building stuff that they've done for the last decade or so in the form probably of like a castle builder or castle customization. They'll give you a big plot of land and let you build out a little castle in your own way. And I think it'll be based probably on basic cells clicking together, similar to the ship customization. But I think there'll be something like that. I also think it's not a coincidence that when they showed the trailer for Elder Scrolls 6, they showed the coastline. And that's why I think that they probably will have a like ship that you get access to at some point that you can sail along the coast. And maybe that's tied to the fast travel system and you can customize the ship. And I'm just saying it would be so freaking hilarious if it was also fast travel reliant. And it was like, yeah, you want to go up to that coastline? Well, hop on your ship at this dock and then you fast travel there. Like, and it's just Starfield all over again. It would be very, very funny. So that's what I think. But this video outlines something we just discussed in response to one of the super chats that came in that I thought was quite interesting, which is what made me think of us looking at this video. Basically, Keaton sent in a super chat saying, why does Todd keep directing BGS games? Wouldn't Elder Scrolls and Fallout benefit from a fresh vision? And my point of view is that I think Todd serves a purpose within the company, and the modern Bethesda games are not necessarily about just getting a really good Metacritic score. It's about creating something with recurrent revenue that's big enough and easy enough to mod for, that you can have basically endless DLC that you don't even have to make yourself. And I think that that's part of the goal. So I think that monetary incentive is why the games are sort of built in this lackluster way, because, and this is the most insane thing before we get into this, paid mods allow you to sell a fix to certain problems, whether it's a lack of content, a lack of new content, offering new weapons, new ship habs and stuff. You basically have a problem and then the paid mod fixes it, which is why you're willing to spend $1 or $5 to get it. So they've built in a monetary incentive to build in problems that they can sell you the fix for. And so no surprise, there are problems to be found, like plenty of them. It's why building out, I really think the moment that they started playing around with paid mods is when everything started to really fall apart. But let's see the argument made by AVV Gaming. Again, great YouTuber. You should get over, get subscribed. We looked at one of his videos previously and loved it. So let's see what he has to say here.
Back to the year 2011. If I say the word Bethesda, what comes to your mind? Excitement? Excellence? The greatest RPG developer of all time? The game development studio was well known for creating some of the best open world games of all time. From Morrowind to Oblivion, Skyrim, both Fallout 3 and 4, they were setting the standards for years. But it seems whenever someone leaves the role at Bethesda, it is usually with a fear for the company's future. Former lead developer Julian LaFay often vented frustration at their new direction. Bruce Nesmith has shared his fears about their upcoming projects. Even my interview with Jonah Loeb highlighted how much the studio has changed over the years.
Hold on, I want to see this.
Bruce Nesmith has shared his fears.
After Starfield, Bethesda's next project is The Elder Scrolls 6, which has been announced for a long time, but is a long way from being released. After there was already some discontent among fans at the release of Starfield, Bethesda is fully expecting that fans will grumble about The Elder Scrolls 6 as well. That's not great. According to Bruce Nesmith, lead designer, it is, quote, almost impossible, end quote, to satisfy fans' expectations. He sees Bethesda in a bit of a trap that Valve has. The studio had a good run for 20 years with Elder Scrolls and Fallout, and maintaining that run is not easy. Only a few studios like Rockstar managed to do that, while Valve doesn't even dare to try. Yeah.
Own Knight donated £10 through Super Chat. I had a tinfoil hat thought. Is it conceivable that Microsoft are raising prices to an untenable amount to kill hardware and focus on software while letting others focus on hardware?
I don't think that's a tinfoil hat at all. I think they're raising prices because they're not making money at the lower prices. And so they're not going to discount them or do anything. Because that's the other thing is you got to remember, as with all things, you get better prices when you order in larger volumes. In order to, you would only order large volumes of consoles if you can sell through those large volumes of consoles, which I don't think Microsoft can do. So I think Microsoft is doing very limited runs of Xbox manufacturing, which drives the prices up, paired with tariffs, paired with certain retailers not wanting to sell it unless they get cheaper rates on it, and so therefore bigger discounts. I think that just reinforces this loop of it not being profitable unless the prices have risen significantly. And so that's why they're raising the prices so much, which will inevitably just lead to it being delisted by more outlets and stores. It will eventually probably become an online only item. You have to order it online. And beyond that, I think it is like ultimately their goal to just go cloud gaming and let third-party manufacturers do stuff. But I mean, I think that their goal is for that to be the primary focus. Like I said earlier in the stream, I think that they're going to eventually handle it basically just like the Surface lineup of laptops. They will manufacture some of their own hardware, but it's not their focus at all. Like the focus of Windows is not the Surface laptops. If you buy a Surface, cool, but their goal is to just distribute software. And if you happen to buy a Surface laptop, they're happy. But anyway, yeah, I don't think that's a tinfoil hat at all. OG, what game do you think has a better chance of being a 10 out of 10? Elder Scrolls 6 or Mass Effect 4? Probably Elder Scrolls 6, because at this point, I'm honestly not sure if Mass Effect 4 ever gets launched. If I had to pick one, Elder Scrolls 6, because I honestly, at this point, am not sure Mass Effect 4 will ever happen. Anyway, continuing.
Their upcoming projects. Even my interview with Jonah Loeb highlighted how much the studio has changed over the years and not for the better. Well, now we've seen former marketing boss Pete Hines making a few quotes that bring up more concerns than ever. The first article, there's just no question that the company is not the same. In this article, Pete Hines goes on to say, it was Robert Altman's company and we were his employees, no question, but he treated us more like family and we found a culture that really fit us. When it was working, it was magical. We were a small private company. It's way easier to stay out of scrutiny when you're not having to put your earnings reports out for the whole world. There's just no question that the company is not the same. It has been radically changed and altered from the company that we built. It is what it is. Things change, things move on, but at its height, it was a really special thing to be a part of.
Yeah, and Pete Hines is so fascinating. Pete Hines is so fascinating because I think Pete Hines is like kind of one of the unsung heroes of Bethesda Softworks just in general. He's an OG. He's been around forever. You know, he was there back in like the early days of making Oblivion. You can see him in the making of Oblivion documentary. It's very, very funny because is that him? This is him in the striped shirt. Yeah. So that's a very young Pete Hines. Okay. Very young Pete Hines. But he started at Bethesda Game Studios, and then eventually he became like head of marketing for all of Bethesda Softworks, and then he did a lot of work directly with Zenimax. So like he was a head honcho by the end of his career, and he was the one that would very publicly say, we are not going to give up on games. We're going to see games through. We're going to see them fixed. If they launch with issues, we're going to fix it. Like, I think he deserved a lot of credit for that. And I think it's no coincidence he retired, and literally like a matter of weeks later, they shut down Arcane Austin working on Redfall. Because after Redfall launched with all of its problems, he came out and was like, we're going to work on it until it's the game that we promised and until it's the game that the fans wanted. We're not giving up on it. And then he retires, and a matter of weeks later, they shut down the whole studio, fire everybody, abandon the game, and move on. And I think it's because, like, without him there as the stopgap, the one guy saying, no, we're going to do this and we're going to see it through, I think there was nobody else to stand up and fight for it. And maybe he left in part because they were like, we're going to do this. No, we're not listening to you. I don't know, but I think he deserves a lot of credit. And I think, you know, he was working his butt off for a long time at a privately held company that was more intimate and private. And then when they sold to Microsoft, it became part of a corporate machine. And that just raises the standards. It changes how things work. And because the company needs quarterly reports and they need to know how everything's going on a month-to-month basis, you can't do things the way you used to do. Those paid mods become way more important, you know, because you have to justify, where's your revenue for this quarter? Oh, you don't have any because you didn't release a game? Okay, that's a problem, because especially if we're doing layoffs next year, this is going to look bad. It's like, well, we're working on a game that's going to make a lot of money in 2-3 years when we launch. Doesn't matter. Your revenue's bad right now. You know, we're playing the short-term game. It's the problem with going public and getting part of one of these big companies versus going and staying private. It changes how things work.
Jonah Loeb said in my interview too, stating that Bethesda were victims of their own success. And now we have this article from Games Radar stating how upset Pete was with the now infamous collector's edition of Fallout 76.
Quote, we cannot charge $300 for this. It's effing insulting. Pete Hines said about Fallout 76's infamous collector's edition, saying it was, quote, probably the dumbest thing I ever did at Bethesda. Woof.
With him stating that it was an insult, which directly reflects his remarks about Bethesda's obsession over revenue. In this video, I'm going to explain Bethesda's rise, their peak, and their inevitable fall. Before we get started, if you are new here and enjoy video game analysis, reviews, and news, please consider subscribing. Anyway, let's get into it. Bethesda Softworks was founded in 1986 by Christopher Weaver. In 1988, Julian LeFay joined the tiny studio, just 4 employees working out of Weaver's house, 2 in development and 2 in admin. At this time, Bethesda wasn't making RPGs, mainly sports games such as Wayne Gretzky Hockey. The game sold well and led to a movie license for the Terminator thanks to Weaver's Hollywood connections. Another key figure, Ted Peterson, soon joined as a writer. He worked on the Terminator 2029 and Rampage, which were both well received. But Bethesda's breakthrough came in '94 with The Elder Scrolls I Arena. Originally a fighting game, staff like LeFay and Peterson shifted its direction towards role-playing. The game shipped with limited RPG mechanics, but it set the stage for its sequel, Daggerfall, a massive open-world RPG with one of the largest game maps ever. LeFay and Peterson built the Elder Scrolls universe and lore that we know today, and Daggerfall's success established Bethesda as a leader in RPGs. Around this time, Todd Howard joined the team. By 1999, Bethesda faced financial trouble. Weaver partnered with Robert Altman to form Zenimax Media, Bethesda's new parent company. Disputes soon forced Weaver out, but Bethesda remained central to Zenimax.
Yeah, if you don't know Weaver, he was like kind of, it's so confusing, but he was one of the founders and worked his butt off for a long time. Yeah, as you can see here, Christopher Weaver. This guy. So he worked on this, of course. He was credited with Bethesda making the first real-time physics engine for sports simulation. When he left the studio, so as you can see, Weaver contributed to the stake in Bethesda to Zenimax. He served as CTO until 2002, then was pushed out. He filed a lawsuit against Zenimax, claiming he was ousted by his business partners and was owed severance when Zenimax didn't renew his employment contract. The lawsuit was ongoing as of 2007, and at that time, Weaver was still a 33% stockholder. And I've tried to do digging. I'm still not sure what happened with it, but I think he got a fat stack when they sold, because I think he still owned major chunks of the company when they sold to Microsoft. So, you know, he got out. He did okay, but anyway.
The next big project was the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, with Todd Howard as project lead. Unlike Arena and Daggerfall, which relied on procedurally generated content, Howard pushed for a handcrafted map.
I want it handcrafted. Jimbo, thank you for the 10. Have you all seen the real-time travel in Daggerfall? Apparently the map is estimated to be about the size of the UK. Yeah, it's one of the early versions of procedural generation of maps and stuff. It is bafflingly huge. Bigger than pretty much any other game like it, you know, in a lot of ways, way ahead of its time, for sure.
Leadership sided with him, prompting LaFay's exit, though he did later return and consulted on the project. To shape Morrowind, Bethesda brought in Ken Rolston, a former tabletop RPG designer. His influence gave the game its narrative depth, faction politics, and morally complex decision-making. Released in 2002 on both PC and Xbox, Morrowind sold over 4 million copies, introduced console players to RPGs, and cemented Bethesda's reputation.
And this is one of the things that I think is crucial to remember about early Bethesda. Like Bungie, for example, with Destiny, they blew up because they were the first ones to really introduce that like MMO looter shooter thing to consoles. And it blew up, did amazingly well. And their goal with Marathon was to introduce like extraction hardcore shooters to console. And they thought that that would blow them up into mass success. And for Bethesda, when they came in with Morrowind and they offered like intense RPG gameplay, that had never really happened before on the console side of things. It just hadn't happened. And so they were the only players in that space with no real competition, and they dominated for sure.
Both Peterson and Julian LaFay left after its release. Next came the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. While it streamlined its RPG mechanics, cutting them back, it looked more polished, offered voice-acted characters, and it sold 9.5 million copies, winning Game of the Year. Rolston then departed shortly afterwards. Bethesda then acquired the Fallout franchise from Interplay, releasing Fallout 3 to strong reviews and 12 million in sales. Bethesda had proven it could build more than just the Elder Scrolls. Their magnum opus arrived in 2011 with the Elder Scrolls Skyrim. Though many veterans had left, a young close-knit team pulled it off. As artist Jonah Loeb described in interviews, the group was small, everyone wore many hats, and creative freedom was high, almost like a modern indie studio. The result? One of the most successful games ever, selling over 60 million copies and winning Game of the Year. Bethesda at this point were known as the industry darlings. They created some of the most iconic games ever, always over-delivered on what was expected, and they had a strong relationship with their fans. We trusted them. Bethesda followed this with Fallout 4, its most successful launch, though criticized for shallow writing, limited RPG depth, and a heavy focus on settlement building. By this point, Bethesda's pattern was clear. Each game looked better, played bigger, and outsold the last. But the cracks were starting to show.
Well, I think it's also no coincidence that once the core like RPG designers left, the RPG stuff started to get left behind and abandoned and forgotten. And it was cut even at times in pursuit of other things that Todd deemed more important. That's why I've said for a long time, as have many other people, Bethesda games aren't really RPGs in the true sense of the term as it relates to old school like CRPGs. It's just not. You know, a real RPG, a true to God role-playing game is something like a Baldur's Gate, where there is an insane amount of variation in choosing your role, both morally and in terms of gameplay, and it can vastly change how things play out differently. That's just not what Bethesda games are. What Bethesda is amazingly good at, or at least were, was open world adventure and building worlds that you wanted to get lost in. Like that's what they were really, really good at. And I think it's why New Vegas, what it like is so beloved today, is because it gives you a taste of Obsidian, or rather it gives you a taste of Bethesda open world design mixed with Obsidian, old school Obsidian level RPG design and writing. And it's a hybrid that you don't really get anywhere else. Amazing open world exploration, something you just want to get lost in. And then also phenomenal writing, factions, consequence for your actions and decisions. And that's exactly what people were hoping Bethesda would do moving forward. But that's not the types of games that they make, or at least not since like Oblivion, they haven't, or Morrowind, they haven't really tried to do that. And it's because the guys that were the advocates for the RPG systems left. So the only people left were the guys that have been running Bethesda for the last 2 decades, basically. And they are not that into role-playing games. They aren't that interested. Luke, what's your evidence they're not that interested in role playing? The fact that they've cut so many of the systems. You know, even at times, something as simple as the ability to kill an NPC, they remove the ability to do it because that could affect a quest line. So instead, the guy drops to his knees. They set his like reputation with you down to the bottom, if that's even tracked in these instances. And then next time you talk to him, it's back to normal. He's like, anyway, what I was saying is, I need you to go get me a ham and cheese sandwich from this galaxy 5 miles or 5 trillion light years away. Thank you. And he just like acts like you never shot him in the face. It's frustrating, but it's because like they are not making RPGs, they're making something else, like open world
Ralston
games.
Peterson and LaFay gone, Bethesda drifted from deep role-playing games towards a more action open world model.
Yeah.
Skyrim was technically superior to Morrowind, with better graphics, smoother gameplay, and massive scope, but it offered fewer RPG choices, shallow dialogue, and Radiant quests that felt endless. Fallout 4 doubled down, leaning more toward a looter shooter with weak writing and repetitive quest design. The shift was clear. Complex role-playing gave way to streamlined action. So at this point, Bethesda had, on the surface, managed to surpass each previous release in terms of sales and appearance, but underneath, they continued to veer from the original blueprint that led to their early success. Great staff had left and were replaced with those with different values. Fans had started to become divided. At this point, the focus became about revenue, rather than making great games, as Pete Hines has stated. Fallout 4 introduced paid mods, whereas before they were free. Now they charged for fan creations and took a slice of the pie, introducing a new revenue stream. The Elder Scrolls Online released, which used a subscription expansion model to generate recurring revenue, and Skyrim re-released 6 times for 10 consoles in 10 years, giving Bethesda a reason to keep income flowing. Skyrim Anniversary Edition was literally just the base game mixed in with fan-made mods and shipped for full price. Greed had consumed Bethesda. And then in 2019, everything came crashing down with the release of Fallout 76. After the success of Fallout 3 and 4, the concept of an even bigger game with better graphics and online play seemed like a slam dunk. Up until this point, Bethesda had never missed. Fallout 76, though, launched in a disastrous state, riddled with bugs far beyond Bethesda's usual Bugfesta reputation. Players faced disappearing characters, T-posing enemies, broken quests, crashes, lag, and countless glitches that made the game virtually unplayable. Reviews from critics and fans alike were overwhelmingly negative. The game had been developed not by Bethesda's main team but by their Austin studio, who faced the impossible task of turning the already fragile creation engine into a massive online world 4 times the size of Fallout 4, all under tight deadlines.
So this I've heard conflicting storylines on, and it's interesting because the story has sort of changed over the last 7 years or so, noticeably when it's convenient for whoever's talking. So when Bethesda launched Fallout 76, the discourse, well, let me back up even further. The initial marketing for Fallout 76 framed it as being a collaborative effort by Bethesda's main team in Maryland and the team in Austin, Texas. There's the No Clip documentary on Fallout 76, which released shortly before the game came out. You can see here, No Clip. This was June of 2018. So right after the announcement, they did this documentary. And in that documentary, they show clips of the development of the game at Maryland. So they show like the team in Maryland working on it. They show members of the team working on it in Maryland. You know, it's not the team in Austin. And Todd is, of course, talking about all the work they've done. And of course, they mention that, you know, they have other people working on it. But you notice who's doing these interviews. It's not new faces. It's the core guys like Emil and Todd. And yes, that is the guy. We looked at it. But this is the same guy that left Bethesda to make that indie game. He did launch it recently, actually. But yes, that is the same guy. Yeah, after doing this and launching Fallout 76, he left and made his own solo indie team of just himself, and he put out his very own game, which is kind of cool. Fallout 76 kind of broke him. But you see, like, they are framing this all around it being a Bethesda Game Studios production, and they're showing the people in Maryland. And this is when they're marketing it. The game comes out. All of a sudden, the narrative shifts, and they start to say that this was a Bethesda Game Studios Austin production, kind of pivoting away and saying they should get the blame for it. It's not us. Stay excited for Starfield. It was them. And then the story shifted again once Fallout 76 started to kind of have a resurgence, especially with the show. And now anytime they talk about Fallout 76, Todd is there and they are very, very proud of it. And it's part of the Bethesda Game Studios family of games. And so all of a sudden now they're back on it. So who knows what the actual truth is? My understanding, having spoken to people that worked on the game, is that Maryland was much more involved than they made it out to be. So they were very actively working on it. Basically, while they were working on Fallout 76, the tech team that probably should have been helping with Fallout 76, they were doing a lot of the procedural tech building that they would use in Starfield. So that's part of the reason that it kind of got split up and why they took 3 years to do this spin-off project, because they needed to do a lot of groundwork for Starfield. So yeah, it's my understanding is that the framing of it was Austin, not Maryland, that's something Bethesda has put out when it's convenient for them to put it out. But it seems as though Maryland was actually much, much more involved than they wanted you to believe in the past. They were working on it a lot. So anyway, moving on, continuing.
Corners were cut, features were rushed, and the release was incomplete. Word of its failure spread quickly online, tanking reviews and sales, making it the worst-selling Fallout to date. To make matters worse, when players flooded Bethesda with refund requests, the company initially agreed, but later refused refunds to anyone who had downloaded the game, further enraging fans and damaging their reputation. Fallout 76's problems didn't end with just the game itself. Many fans had pre-ordered the expensive collector's edition, advertised to include a high-quality West Tech canvas bag. But when it arrived, buyers found a cheap nylon bag instead. Bethesda admitted that the canvas version was too expensive and initially refused to make it right, despite having marketed it differently.
I really do think that there was the customer service group within Bethesda Game Studios. There is something about them where they are involved in multiple controversies year after year after year. So like literally like with Fallout 76, they were posting stuff like this. We're sorry that you're not happy with the bag. The bag shown in the media was a prototype and was too expensive to make. We aren't planning on doing anything about it. That's how they signed it off. Crazy. This is the same team, the Bethesda like customer service group. This was the subset of the customer service group that worked on merchandising, but it's still part of their customer service like team, managed by the same people. And that's the same customer service team that responded to Starfield refund requests by saying stuff like, or bad reviews on Steam, by saying stuff like, well, when the astronauts went to the moon, they certainly weren't bored, and stuff like that. It's crazy. Like there's something within the customer service training or leadership that just makes some funny reactions that are just unhinged.
And initially refused to make it right, despite having marketed it differently. After the backlash, they promised real canvas bags within 6 months, but the Redemption website was so poorly built that it leaked users' personal data, and some fans never received their replacements, even today. Another fiasco came with the Nuka-Cola Dark, an $80 collectible rum bottle advertised in a custom Nuka-Cola glass. What customers actually received was a cheap plastic shell around a regular rum bottle. Fans felt deceived again, and Bethesda's dismissive responses, blaming costs, denying misleading ads, and refusing refunds, only deepened the outrage. And the worst thing is, they sold this collector's edition for a staggering $300, despite its value being far from that. Pete Hines has just said this: "My first reaction was, when did we add a canvas bag to this collector's edition? Because the version I approved didn't have one. They were trying to add more value to the collector's edition. We were always fighting with the finance people about margins, right? I would throw fits around. We cannot charge $300 for this. It's insulting." So just from this recently released article, we can really get a strong feeling for what was going on at the studio during this time. They had very little regard for their own fan base, essentially just telling them to get over it. Even their marketing director knew it was overpriced. The fans were no longer the priority. the profit was. Now add to that, Fallout 76 veered greatly from previous entries and was solely online with a focus on making revenue. Memberships, pets, fishing, DLCs and microtransactions dominate your screen after logging in, squeezing as much money as possible from players. The majority of fans of single-player games didn't connect with the new entry, but Bethesda didn't care. They locked in on those who did enjoy it, with their goal being to extract as much money as possible from the whales who played that game. Microtransactions look good on the bottom line. With this new strategy, Bethesda...
And it's why I've said, Todd has been very, very coy about what comes after Elder Scrolls 6. Everyone asked him, so is it Fallout 5? And he's like, well, when I said Fallout 5 is after that, I meant at some point in the future. And you're like, what? What do you mean? Why won't you just say the next game after Elder Scrolls 6 is Fallout 5? He's like, well, I said that after Elder Scrolls 6, we will of course be doing Fallout 5, but that just means sometime in the future. If it was next, you would just say it's next. Why aren't you just saying it'll be next? And I think it's because something else is next. I think that's why. And if you know that this is the kind of stuff that they want to do, I think we're going to just see more of it.
Bethesda were no longer seen as the darlings of the industry.
My suggestion is like they're going to do their own Elder Scrolls Online, like Elder Scrolls 76, or even a Starfield 76 or something. That's my suspicion as to what they're up to. I think it's in line with their recent behavior. It's in line with their desire for more recurrent revenue. They've used Starfield as up there as part of their core pillars, but they don't have a live service offering for it. The reason why I think it could be Elder Scrolls related specifically, though, is because I also think that if Microsoft is looking at doing mass layoffs, I think that they're more likely to lay off people at Zenimax Online because they recently unionized. We all know what Microsoft thinks about unions, and they already laid off a chunk of that studio, shutting down the Project Blackbird. So they might shut them down and then have Bethesda put their own Elder Scrolls Online offering up.
And this new entry reflected their shift in direction. They went from providing some of the greatest open world RPGs of all time to catering to a more mainstream audience to then providing an online MMO. After this game's release, Bethesda's reputation took a beating, but it would only get worse in 2020 when Microsoft announced they would acquire the company for $7.5 billion. After this, Starfield would be released. Now, I've made about 6,000 videos on why Starfield was a letdown, which will be linked in the description, but here's a short summary. Starfield ultimately disappointed because it abandoned the studio's strongest feature, handcrafted open worlds in favor of bland procedurally generated planets, repetitive copy-paste dungeons and empty exploration. Weak writing, unimaginative lore, lifeless quests, and shallow role-playing compounded the problem, leaving little reason to keep playing after the first 20 hours. While a small fanbase remains loyal, most saw Starfield as a directionless experiment that once again moved away from the formula that had made Bethesda successful. The game flopped. So Microsoft came in and began...
I don't mean to be pedantic. I don't think it flopped. Because there is a technical definition of flopping, dare I say floppage, and I don't think it met that definition. I think it probably turned a profit. Hype was through the roof, okay? Hype was crazy high for the game. A lot of people pre-ordered it to play it early. Even if they played it on Game Pass, you could pay an extra $35 to play it a week early with everybody else that got the premium edition. So I don't, and I'm no fan of Starfield, but I have seen no evidence that it flopped, because flopping implies like losing money. I don't think they lost money. I think they made money, and I think that the recurrent revenue probably also helped them make a lot of money and profit. But yeah, anyway.
Implementing changes immediately with a bigger emphasis on turnover. Elder Scrolls Online changed for the worse, video here, 76 went harder on microtransactions, and the Oblivion remaster released with minimal changes and for full price. Whilst Microsoft has publicly emphasized creative freedom, the underlying reality is that Bethesda's projects must now justify their place within Microsoft's broader financial strategy. The Oblivion remaster showcased this, with the game releasing with minimal changes from the 2006 original, but with the price tag of a new game, displaying Bethesda's new requirement to take advantage of long-term fans and maximize income. And then we have Pete Hines' quote: There's just no question that the company is not the same. It's been radically changed and altered from the company that we built. It is what it is, things change, things move on, but at its height, it was a really special thing to be a part of. From his words, it's clear that the company is no longer what it was, and that is such a shame when you look back at what they were. Oblivion was my first ever open world game, and I will never forget exiting the sewer and being greeted to this view. Or when I left Vault 101 in Fallout 3 to see this. And I will never forget approaching the gates of Whiterun on my first Skyrim playthrough.
Oh yeah,
These
dude.
games were made for gaming fans, by gaming fans. Now we get greeted to microtransactions in a menu instead. Over time, Bethesda began drifting from the core formula, deciding to opt for a more user-friendly, simplified experience in order to appeal to more players, which would lead to inevitably more profit. But as a result of this change, they lost connection with their day one fans. And then with Fallout 76, they took their mask off completely, revealing a greedy corporation that only cared about profits. Recently, Bethesda have begun an annual livestream called Fallout Day, and so far they have only introduced new microtransactions for Fallout 76 with not a word on Fallout 5. Starfield received much criticism, but player feedback was met with resistance. Since then, we've seen countless quotes come out from their lead writer, Emil Pagliarulo, stating Starfield is the best game we've ever made. This same lead...
To be fair, he did say in some ways it's the best game we've ever made, which implies in other ways it's not, which I think is fair. But I think it's pretty clear that there's a fundamental disconnect between the audience.
Emil Pagliarulo stating Starfield is the best game we've ever made. This same lead writer stated fans don't want a good story because they'll spend hours building shacks, despite their previous games having strong writing. When Starfield Shattered Space DLC released to a poor reception, Emil said, "If we understand one thing, it's DLC." Once again showcasing a disconnect between Bethesda and their fanbase. So we end up...
Yeah, well, and those comments too, like, I've done a lot of thinking about it, because I was like, what is the best way of describing what he's exhibiting there? Because it really is bizarre. How, like, he could say that he knows DLC, they know DLC really well, it's great. But I really do believe that delusion is the best description of it. A delusion is a firm, false belief that goes against reality and is held despite clear evidence to the contrary. This is also funny. Often occurring as a symptom of psychotic disorder like schizophrenia. I'm not saying he's schizophrenic, but what I'm saying is there is a clear level of delusion within leadership at Bethesda. If they truly believe that Starfield is in a lot of ways the best game they've ever made, if they honestly believe that it's up there with Fallout and Elder Scrolls, if they honestly think that Shattered Space was a solid DLC, a good DLC worth the money, that is delusional. That it just is. And if you don't think it's delusional, like I think I can argue that it is a position you're holding despite clear evidence to the contrary in the form of overwhelmingly negative reviews. The best reviews are mixed. And even then, there's very few of them. Most of the reviews are negative for that DLC. Even the people that thought it was decent thought that the price was exorbitant. And then if you're saying it's also one of the best games you've ever made, or in many ways the best game you've ever made, again, I think the ultimate judges of that are the fans paying for it and playing it, not the people making the damn thing. And that also, we can look at empirical metrics and find that it's not. So it fits the definition of delusion, I think. And I think when you're acting based on delusions, it's really hard to deliver something that is an improvement because you don't see anything wrong with what you're doing.
End up in this current situation that we're in today. Bethesda were dominating. They made the best games and pushed the open world genre forward. They excelled not only in sales, but also in reviews. They managed to earn a strong following of dedicated fans who trusted them. Over time, they drifted from their formula and began trying new things, which resulted in their weakest games to date in Fallout 76 and Starfield. The games may have been poor overall, but the game's blueprints also completely differentiated from what their core fan base wanted.
But this is key. This is key, what he just said.
Fallout 76 and Starfield. The games may have been in Over time, they drifted from their formula and began trying new things, which resulted in their weakest games to date in Fallout 76.
Weakest games to date. According to what metric? That's the key. Weakest according to what metric? Because we may find them weak in terms of open world design, in terms of technical polish or whatever, or being comparable to other open world games and contemporaries of the time, or even like, yeah, average player satisfaction. We can point to these metrics and find it wanting, but is that the metric that they care about? I think the whole premise of the video and the statements by Pete and everybody else seems to indicate that the key metric, or even the only metric that they seem to really care about, is revenue and therefore profits. That's what they're judging performance on. It's why when Todd was asked, I think it was Greg Miller, he was asked what he thought of, what Todd thought of the people that didn't love Starfield that much, thought it had problems. And Todd goes, well, there's a lot of people that liked Starfield and a lot of people who liked it a little bit less, or some people that liked it a bit less. But when I look at a game's performance, I'm looking at, the crash rates, the bug rates. We're looking and seeing more players than have ever been in our games ever before. Like, he's looking at overall player engagement, I'm sure spending, I'm sure all of that stuff. It's just not the metrics that we would identify with or care about. But that's why you can start to understand why all of the focus has been reoriented around these live service operations, paid mods, and stuff like that, because that furthers the pursuit of the metric that they do care about. I don't think they care that much about Metacritic scores, because pretty clearly it's not what drives revenue. You can have a 10 out of 10 on Metacritic. It doesn't mean that your game is going to make as much money as Fallout 76, because I think Fallout 76 probably will make a lot more money than most of these games that are getting, nominated for Game of the Year. And it's a little depressing, but that's just how these games work. It's like when you look up and you see how much money like a freaking Hearthstone can make in a day or in a month versus a year. You see how much money like what's it called? Genshin Impact makes in a year, and you're like, oh my God. Like, it's not even close. They make like 10 Baldur's Gates a year. It's not even close.
6 and Starfield. The games may have been poor overall, but the game's blueprints also completely differentiated from what their core fan base wanted. Fallout 76 released in an unplayable state. They dropped the ball with the collector's edition and refused to take accountability. They continued to solely focus on the MMO, despite fans not really enjoying it.
Single player fans. There are a lot of people who play Fallout 76 and spend a lot of money on it. And you could see that even in the Steam player count numbers after the show dropped. A lot of people went over and played Fallout 76 for the first time, or for the first time in a long time after the show dropped. So there's a lot of people, but pretty clearly it's not the old school audience that liked Fallout 3, for example, or Fallout New Vegas. But again, what does Bethesda ultimately care about? It's the revenue. It's the dollars at the bottom line. And the people that are playing Fallout 76 are willing to spend a lot more money than the old school fans of Fallout 3. They got deeper pockets, and they're conditioned to spend money in these games. Whereas you filthy individual, you only want to play the game that you bought. You want to buy the complete game and not buy microtransactions in it. Get out of here. They're much happier with having fans in a game like Fallout 76 than having 10 times the number of players in a single player game. Like, they're much happier with the paid mods and the people that are willing to spend on that.
Negative feedback on their games by fighting their fans, and they continue to say statements that seem so detached from reality that it's almost comical. And now Microsoft has taken over, changing their entire setup. Previous employees have nothing nice to say, and fans no longer enjoy their games or trust them as a company. Add to this, their competitors like CD Projekt Red, Larian Studios and Rockstar have moved so far ahead of them in every aspect that their games now appear more dated than ever, leaving them miles behind. How does this happen? How do you go from being the #1 studio in the world with a strong fan base to falling so far behind and being known as untrustworthy? I'll tell you how. Greed. Bethesda used to stand for something. They had their formula. They had staff who cared about the projects and they valued customer satisfaction over money. And then slowly, over time, this shifted to being all about milking as much money as possible and disregarding feedback across the board. The stakes and budget skyrocketed. Zenimax increasingly pushed Bethesda towards high-margin models, DLCs, microtransactions, and live service games, following the trends of most AAA studios in the
Dude, I hadn't seen this before. They have crown crates, Dark Brotherhood crew steed. Look at that, a mysterious collection of Dark Brotherhood related items. You are guaranteed at least 4 rewards. They're just loot boxes within Elder Scrolls Online. And then Todd will have the gall to say, hey, why did it take 15 years to put out Elder Scrolls 6? And he's like, well, you've had ESO. You've had ESO, so you can just grind out some ESO loot boxes and you'll be happy, right? Oh man, I hadn't seen Elder Scrolls Online monetization in a bit.
Actions and live service games.
OMG, you have no idea of the greed in ESO. Is that worth a deep dive in and of itself? Do I dare?
Following the trends of most AAA studios in the USA at that time. Bottom line numbers were more important than fan satisfaction. Bethesda were at their best when they made games for their fans, when they didn't chase mass appeal or record profits. That was the Bethesda we loved, and with all these changes, I lose more faith each day that the Elder Scrolls 6 will live up to expectations. But no matter what, I will always remember Bethesda for what they were, the studio who made my childhood incredible, rather than what they are today, a studio who represents everything wrong in modern gaming. Like Pete Hines stated, when the studio shifted from a small family-like setup who loved making games to a corporate-like structure that solely focused on profit margins, that was the point of no return and the beginning of the end of the Bethesda we once knew and loved. If there's one lesson Bethesda should take from this fall, it's that their greatest strength was always making games for their fans, not their shareholders. And if the Elder Scrolls 6 is going to live up to its legacy, that's the truth they need to remember. But anyway, that's it for this one.
But will it? Nah. Nah. I think we all know how this story ends. And it's going to be entertaining. But in the meantime, I'm telling you, the hype is going to be out of control. If you thought the hype for Starfield was silly, which it was, it's only going to be even worse. Like, there's going to be so much name calling if you dare to say, let's not like get our hopes up too high because like they did Starfield last time. I don't know, but Todd's going to get up on stage. He's going to hype it up. It's going to blow your mind. Going to blow your mind, man. It's ridiculous. So, but I think AVV Gaming is right. The problem started when they started really chasing those dollar bills, and it suffered as a result. And I think that last line is key. If you're making a game for your fans, it'll be a lot better than the game you made for shareholders. But all of this, like, again, you're like, how is it that they keep doing this time and time again when the fans are so clear? It's because they're serving you is not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to increase those margins and the bottom line. And there's plenty of people willing to spend a lot of money on these microtransactions and the Dark Brotherhood crates and Fallout First. Plenty of people out there willing to spend that money. Not you, probably. But there's a lot of people out there who will spend money on those. And they'd much rather have those people as their fans, quote unquote, than people like you and me who want them to just make a really good game that we play for 15 years. You know, a game like Skyrim is really nice to have in their portfolio. It's a good trophy to have on their shelf, but it doesn't pay the bills beyond 6 or 7 or 8 re-releases, you know, on 10 consoles over 10 years, as he said. But something that does pay the bills is like Fallout 76, where they can just put out another random skin or cosmetic that they charge $10 for, and the whales in there that spend tons of money on the game will buy it, and the money just keeps pouring in. Check out ESO numbers. Their numbers are really going into a deep dive recently. Oh, is it? Elder Scrolls Online. This is just the Steam version, so no consoles or anything, but you can see it peaked in April 2020 and has been doing okay, but it is certainly on a downward trend. Rather 2017 they spiked a ton, but it's starting to go down. But I mean, even now, right now, there's 10,000 people playing the game, which is wild. It's wild. But We'll see. FU got me, yeah. So what I paid for Fallout First and for 2 months, but it had private servers. They got me. Yeah, they did. They did. They got you. ESO and Fallout 76 are going to make sure they'll never change course. They just hate, I just hate that they won't let another studio work on a mainline game. Well, that would mean giving up control and, oh, that's nice. They put the little things on here. Free week. That's what caused the player spikes. Okay. That's interesting. I like that they tag that. So they had a free week on Tuesday, August 5th, and it didn't really drive higher player counts. That's interesting. I don't see any indication that they're going to change. If they came out and acknowledged the problems with Starfield and like, we're trying to make adjustments, but then I'd be more inclined to think that there's maybe going to be an improvement, but I've seen no indication of that. So anyway, we'll keep an eye on it. I don't think we see anything for another like year and a half. Some people I remember were saying, I think we see Elder Scrolls 6 by the end of 2025. And I was like, I don't think so. But now they're saying next year, and I don't think so about that, but we'll see. We'll see. He took my thing. Red flag.